Hello, my name is Daniel Underwood. Welcome to my garden here in Essex in the southeast of the UK. So many of you may be aware that I've been doing some early sowing this year and some early planting. So the purpose of today's video is to show you the results of that and some ways I'm going about a few things. Down here I have my no-dig mound. So it's about 1.5 feet high, about half a metre, something like that. And the first 2/3 of it are composed of the soil from this local area, the topsoil basically. So it's well draining soil here, and one of the downsides of that can be it can be quite hard to keep it watered in the summer. So on top of it I have a mixture of grass cuttings and also some cardboard. Some of you may remember I had a compost bin here. Now it's not fully broken down, but I put it on here and everything in it so far is doing quite well. So I've got some peas here. I've got two varieties. I've got Oscar, which is an early pea, and I've also got Champion of England, which is a tall climbing pea. So the Oscar should get about 3 feet high, something like that, and the Champion of England should get about 6 feet high. So expecting those to do well. Now, with regards to the peas, I planted them probably about 2 months ago, something like that. I initially brought them on in the polytunnel, and about 3 weeks ago I planted them out here. And I had some fleece over them to protect them from birds, but they seem to be past the point now of getting damaged by any birds or anything, and they're doing well and they're looking quite strong. So I'm going to take this fleece off, and I've got over some little gem lettuce that I probably planted in cell trays in the polytunnel about 6 weeks ago, and then I transplanted them out here about 2 weeks ago. So let's have a look. Oh yeah, they're looking very good indeed. Just fold the fleece over. Now I've got the fleece on basically to protect them from birds. They don't need frost protection, although the extra warmth might actually help them grow a little bit quicker. But yep, looking good. No slug damage or pest damage at all that I can see, and so far so good. Here you can just about see some broad beans. These are variety Aquadulture Claudia, which I planted on the 18th of February, once again in cell trays in the polytunnel, and I planted them out here on the 8th of April. So they're looking nice and strong. So Aquadulture Claudia, they're generally the variety that's recommended for growing in rather cool areas. It's the one that's recommended for overwintering. They're very hardy plants, so these are doing well here. The plants can get to a good size as well, so if you want a nice good size hardy broad bean, Aquadulture Claudia is definitely a good one. This is broad bean variety the Sutton, so it's a dwarf variety. You can grow these in containers. They're good for small growing spaces, small gardens, and if you're growing a broad bean in a rather exposed location where bigger plants could get battered about a bit by the wind, the Sutton could also be a good one for that situation. So I planted these probably around the same time as the Aquadulture Claudia, and then planted them out also around the same time. So they're actually starting to put out some flowers now, so they are also looking quite good. You can see here I have two varieties of lovely vegetables. So this is Komatsuna, otherwise known as Japanese green and Japanese spinach. It's fully frost and cold hardy here in the UK. It's also drought resistant, which is very handy for here. In the southeast of the UK we can get some of the driest weather by UK standards. And I've also got some Westland autumn curly kale there. So I probably sown both of these around early February time in modules. I initially germinated them inside on an indoor windowsill because the temperatures were still quite cold at that time, and they germinated well. So I planted them out here probably about a month or so ago, maybe 5 weeks, something like that. And I keep this cloche over like that because that way it keeps the birds off, because I'd be quite happy to certainly have a good go at these. Now you can see these little pegs here. I put these through the loops in the cloche to keep it there because these cloches can easily blow away. Now with regards to the Komatsuna, I did notice last year when I had it planted outside, the birds and the slugs and the snails didn't seem to want to eat it too much, but I certainly wouldn't advise to leave it uncovered, certainly in its young stages. But it seems to have a degree of, I don't know, they seem to leave it alone a little bit. So there we are, that could be a good thing, but I'd advise keeping it covered. Now with regards to eating it, what you do is you just pick off a bit like that. As long as you don't pick off too much, it regrows, and it's really nice and it's got a very nice sort of cabbagey taste to it, but I like to eat it raw like this, and it's also nice boiled or steamed, put it into stir fries, but Komatsuna, definitely one of my favourite things to grow. Have some cabbage here. This is variety Ophanum 2 Flower of Spring, and I overwintered this. I initially planted them in modules in the polytunnel around September, October time, and planted them out here around November, which is actually relatively late because it's colder by then and the daylight, the length of the days are quite short, so they didn't really grow much over the winter period. But as it's warmed up and the days have got longer, it really has put in some nice growth, and you can see that they're not covered up. The birds, once they've got to this stage, the birds don't seem to want them too much. Of course, later in the year I'll have to cover them up because of the cabbage white butterflies, but they're growing very well. So you probably worked out this part of the garden really doesn't get a lot of sun. In fact, I'm not sure if this bit gets any full sun at all. Maybe the front does, but you can see the Komatsuna is doing very well. You can see this is doing well, and here, I don't know if you could see it under this cloche, I've got spinach and some younger specimens of Ophanum 2 Flower of Spring, and it's doing quite well. Got some lettuce in there as well, variety Winter Density. So this is like a little dark area of the garden. And also a year or two ago I grew some squashes here, Victor Winter squash, and they got to a good size. So just because you're growing in an area of the garden with low light levels, it's not necessarily, you know, the obstacle that some people believe it is. So this garden is doing well. Down here through the apple tree here, Worcester Pearman, you can see here I have some turnips. These are variety Purple Top Milan, and I initially planted these in January. So I sowed the seeds in module trays, and then I put them on an indoor windowsill in order to germinate them, and then I later plant them out probably around a month or so ago, about the same time I planted out the Komatsuna and the Westland Autumn Kale, and you can see they're doing very well. Once again, the low light levels in this area of the garden don't seem to be inhibiting them too much, and of course one can also eat turnip tops. So there is a little meal there if someone wanted one. So a lot about gardening to me is making the best of the situation that you are currently in whilst working towards something that may be a bit more ideal with regards to gardening. So here in this polytunnel I've got some lovely vegetables that are ready at this time of year when there's not so much to eat. Now basically I overwintered them, so what would commonly be done is you'd initially plant something like spinach here, or chard, kale or lettuce around June, July time, then later transplant it out, let it get a good size before the temperature gets cooler and the day length gets less, thus slowing or indeed stopping growth, and then you just leave it. And you can then pick off little bits throughout the winter, and then what happens is the plant then proceeds to grow in the spring. So I've got quite a variety here, so I'll just show you. This here is chard, variety Ford Hook Giant Chard, and you can really see it's sprung into growth. I mean, look at that. This is absolutely beautiful chard, really nice to eat, and you pick the leaves and then more should regrow. Got some spinach here, and this really has come into some lovely growth as well. And some lettuce here. This is variety All the Year Round, and this variety here is Winter Density. I've Westland Autumn Kale here. Now that's starting to get ready to put flowers out, but I like to eat these little shoots here. They're nice boiled or steamed, and you can also eat them, well, I eat them raw like that, so nice and tasty. And the same here with this red Russian kale. So this is another little small garden area that I've set up, and you can see here it is, and basically what it's doing is it's giving me a nice productive vegetable area in the middle whilst the exotic plants around the edge established. So I've got some fleece over this. Now everything I've got here is fully hardy and needs to be at this time of year. Now I planted everything here, planted out some things around about a month or so ago, something like that. I'll link the video down below if you can have a look, if you want to have a look. This is a no-dig bed, and the fleece is there, and I've got all sorts of things. I've got Scorzonera, which I spoke about, which I'm initially seeing is germinating there, and I've also got some beetroot. I've got two varieties. I've got Bolt Hardy and White Albino, so it's keeping the ground nice and warm here, and just giving it a little bit of head start and also protecting it, so like if a bird started to scratch it up. And yeah, if I look at all the carrots as well, I've got James Scarlet Intermediate I've got, so they're starting to germinate lovely as well. In January I actually planted some beetroot here, and I initially planted them inside in module trays in the polytunnel, so they were quite slow to germinate, and here they are. Now I lost a few to damping off, and what happened was basically I came back from work one night, I was a little bit absent-minded and overwatered them, and then we were hit with that cold period, but quite a few got through, and I've got two varieties here. I've got Bolt Hardy and Cylindra. So Bolt Hardy is generally the one that's recommended for early sowing, because hence the name, it's less likely to bolt. Now maybe January is a little bit early to sow them, but certainly got away with it here so far. So let's have a look at them. Look at those, really nice looking, really healthy. And of course they're a bit small yet, but you can also eat beetroot tops. So hopefully these will be ready around late June time. And the fleece is helping to just give them a little bit of extra warmth. And let's have a look under here at what we've got. Cool, look at that Komatsuna. That is gorgeous, it's so fast growing as well. And some spinach there, look, lovely. So I really like to keep my initial propagation area really flowing at this time of year. So I've got all sorts of things planted here, and what I do is I write what I'm growing. So in the case of this is kale, yes, Nero di Toscana, and I also put the date in which I sown it, so the 13th of March. So there we are. And now this is quite intriguing. So I've actually made some early sowings of runner beans, and this is variety Scarlet Emperor, which is a lovely red flowering variety. So I planted those on the 28th of the 3rd. So let's have a look at those. And one intriguing thing is one week we had, like last week, it seemed we had like an entire week of frosts, which it went down to about -2, which is about 28 degrees Fahrenheit. So these are actually a lot more sturdy, I think, than we give them credit for, and particularly at this early stage. And of course here in the polytunnel, during the day the temperature bounces back relatively quick. Once again, I've got some Dwarf Beans here, variety Tender Green. These are a bush variety. I planted these on the 28th of March, and these are enduring the cold temperatures quite successfully as well. So they're looking very good. So you can probably see my polystyrene containers that I've got here. Now, I've got my tender plants, or my more tender plants, growing in those at the moment. So I will show you. So I've got some bitter melons here, which I planted on the 14th of March. And I initially germinated these on an indoor windowsill, then brought them out. And in these polystyrene containers, they are enduring the colder temperatures quite successfully. And considering these are a tropical or a subtropical plant, they're doing very well. I've also got aubergines in there, and I've also got some yard-long beans. And I've also got some chilies and some peppers, but unfortunately something seems to be eating those, but I can't dwell on that, got to push on. And I've also got some cucumbers as well, but once again something's having a good go at those, but I've got plenty more to come. And yeah, certainly using these polystyrene containers to protect from frost is very successful at this point, and certainly round here I could recommend that people do this, because you know, -2, 28 degrees Fahrenheit, these tropical, subtropical plants are surviving. Of course I do put the lid on though. Now down here in this relatively large pot, I'm doing a little bit of composting. So I'm mentioning this in this video because sometimes people can get overwhelmed with the concept of composting. So this is a really easy way to make compost, and what I've got in here is grass clippings and also some tree leaves from last autumn. So they're actually hornbeam tree leaves, if that interests you, and it's equal amounts of each. So 50% of the grass clippings and 50% of the leaves. You could also do 60% grass and 40% leaves. That would work as well. And the day in which I made it, which is about 5 weeks ago, I put a watering can of water in, probably about 10 litres, something like that, mixed with some granulated sugar, and poured it on and put it in this pot here. And the day after I then gave it some water as well. Other than that, I've done absolutely nothing. And you can see this is perfectly ready to be used as a mulch. Now, I haven't turned it. Had I turned it, it would have been ready even quicker. So I'll let you have a look at this. There you go. Perfectly able to use that as a mulch, although I wouldn't be using this to bring on seedlings. So that's a really easy way of starting your own compost. And I could shake it a bit if I wanted, you know, to let a little bit of air in, or I could tip it into another pot and back into this one in order to turn it. And of course, you know, you could scale this up, so, you know, use a pot or a bin that's bigger, or maybe some bags. So yeah, certainly a very effective way and easy to understand way of getting into composting. So you can see so far that the early plantings and the early planting outs are doing quite well. I've also planted out quite a bit at the allotment: beetroot, lettuce, and I believe spinach and chard as well. So once again, anything you're planting out this time of year, it needs to be hardy. One can always take a risk if it floats their boat, but I certainly wouldn't recommend it. So anyway, let me know what you have planted out already. I'd like to hear it, particularly if you're living in a sort of a cooler part of the UK, or indeed a cooler country in general. It's always nice to know what people are growing. And excusez-moi, if you're growing in an area which is not considered ideal, such as a small space like this little bed here, if this is all you've got, make the best of what you've got. And whilst you're doing that, you can always start implementing other things to improve your gardening situation. Slow and steady wins the race, the tortoise and the hare, and don't let it hold you back. Anyway, I'm going to be making loads of videos, so if you like my work, you can always subscribe and you'll be notified when I put new videos up. You can click the bell as well, and you are free to share and like if indeed you wish. Thank you very much for viewing, and I'll see you next time.